The billionaire didn't cry at his wife's funeral. He stood motionless beside the coffin, black suit, expression empty, eyes hollow. The guests whispered about how strong he was, how composed, how dignified. The priest raised his hand to begin the final prayer. The coffin was sealed, the lid locked, the burial about to begin. Then a child's voice broke the silence. "She's not dead." The crowd turned. A poor little girl stood near the back, barefoot, wearing a faded dress, hair messy. Eyes steady, she's still alive. And in that moment, the billionaire felt something he hadn't felt since the hospital called. Fear. Security moved immediately. The guests looked disgusted. Funerals like this weren't meant for children like her. "Remove her," someone whispered. But the billionaire lifted his hand. "Wait." His voice was calm, but his pulse was not. The girl didn't look confused. She didn't look afraid. She looked certain. He stepped toward her slowly. "What did you say?" She didn't hesitate. "She's not dead." Gasps filled the cemetery. The billionaire leaned closer. "How would you know that?" The girl swallowed. "My mother worked at the hospital." Silence fell like a blade. The billionaire's name was Daniel Whitmore, and his wife, Evelyn Whitmore, had died 2 days earlier. Cardiac arrest, sudden, unexplained, closed casket, private hospital, quick arrangements, too quick. Daniel remembered something now. The hospital director avoiding eye contact, the rushed paperwork, the insistence on sealing the coffin immediately. He looked at the girl. "What is your name, Lena? Where is your mother?" The girl hesitated. They fired her. Why? Because she asked questions. Daniel Whitmore stared at the girl as if she had just spoken the impossible into existence. The cemetery was silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. "What do you mean your mother asked questions?" Daniel asked quietly. The girl hesitated. Her small fingers tightened around the edge of her dress. She said, "Something was wrong." Daniel felt his chest tighten. Wrong. Not impossible. Not dead. Wrong. There was a difference. A dangerous difference. Security stepped closer. "Sir, we need to remove her." Daniel didn't look at them. No. The word was calm, but absolute. The kind of authority that had built empires. The kind that didn't need to repeat itself. They stepped back. Daniel knelt slightly to the girl's level. "What did your mother see?" The girl looked around nervously, as if the answer itself was dangerous. She said, "Your wife was breathing." The words hit Daniel harder than any weapon ever could. Breathing. Not dead. Breathing. The guests began whispering louder now. Disbelief, annoyance, discomfort. This wasn't supposed to happen. Funerals were supposed to be endings, not questions. Daniel's mind raced backward. The hospital room. The machines. The doctor's voice. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore." The covered body. The rushed signature forms. He remembered something else now. He hadn't been allowed to stay long. He hadn't been allowed to see her alone. At the time, grief had blinded him. Now, clarity returned like cold water. "What happened to your mother?" Daniel asked. The girl's voice became smaller. "They told her to leave." "Why?" "She said your wife moved her fingers." Daniel stopped breathing. The world tilted slightly. Not dead, not gone. Moved. Daniel stood immediately. The priest spoke nervously. "Mr. Whitmore." "The ceremony." Daniel ignored him, ignored everyone. He turned to his assistant. "Call the hospital." His assistant hesitated. "Sir, now?" Daniel's eyes hardened. "Now." The call connected quickly. Money always made things faster. "This is Daniel Whitmore," he said coldly. Silence fell on the other end. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore. I want the full medical report." "It has already been provided, sir." Daniel's voice dropped lower. "I want the real one." Silence. Longer this time. More dangerous. "We've followed all procedures," Daniel interrupted. "Did she move?" The question hung in the air like a blade. The voice on the phone faltered. "No, sir." Daniel closed his eyes. He knew lies. He had built fortunes around detecting them, and this was one. He looked back at the coffin. Black. Still. Silent. Too silent. The girl stood where she had been, watching him, not with fear, with certainty, as if she already knew the truth he was still trying to accept. Daniel stepped toward the coffin slowly, each step heavier than the last. The guests murmured nervously. "Sir?" his assistant asked carefully. Daniel didn't stop, because now there was only one truth left. Not what the doctors said, not what the hospital declared, only what was inside that coffin. He stopped inches from it. His hand hovered above the polished surface. He felt something he had never felt in business. Not risk, not uncertainty, fear. Real fear. Because opening the coffin would do one of two things: prove the girl wrong, or prove everything had been a lie. Behind him, the girl whispered, "She's still there. Not dead. Still there." Daniel's hand slowly touched the coffin, and in that moment, his entire world balanced on what he would do next. Daniel Whitmore had signed billion-dollar contracts without hesitation. He had taken risks that could destroy entire companies. He had faced powerful men who feared nothing, but nothing had ever made his hands tremble like this. His fingers rested on the coffin, cold, still, silent. Behind him, hundreds of eyes watched, waiting, judging, doubting. The priest stepped forward nervously. "Mr. Whitmore, this is highly irregular." Daniel didn't turn around. His voice came out calm. But hollow. "Open it." Gasps erupted through the crowd. His assistant froze. "Sir, are you certain?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Open it." The assistant hesitated only for a moment, then signaled to the funeral staff. Two men stepped forward slowly. their movements uncertain, careful, as if they feared what they might find, or what they might not. The metal locks clicked open, one by one. Each sound echoed like a gunshot in the silence. Click, click, click. The lid shifted, slowly. Painfully, the air felt heavier. The world felt smaller. Daniel stopped breathing. The lid opened. Evelyn Whitmore lay inside, perfect, peaceful, unmoving, her face pale, her hands crossed over her chest, exactly as he remembered, exactly as death should look. A wave of shame hit him. Maybe the girl was wrong. Maybe grief had made him weak. Maybe this was nothing but desperation. He leaned closer, his vision blurred, his chest tightened. He whispered her name. Evelyn. Nothing. No response, no movement, just silence. Behind him, the guest began whispering again. Embarrassment replaced tension. Relief replaced fear. His assistant stepped closer. "Sir, she's gone." Daniel stared at her face, searching, begging, for anything, for something, for life. Then he saw it. So small, he almost missed it. Her finger moved, barely, but it moved. Daniel froze. His entire body went rigid. He leaned closer, staring, waiting, praying, and then it happened again. A tiny twitch, impossible, unmistakable, alive. Daniel stepped back suddenly. His voice broke for the first time. She moved. The assistant shook his head nervously. "Sir." She moved. Now louder. Now undeniable. Panic spread instantly. Guests stepped back. Some screamed. Some stared in disbelief. The priest dropped his book. One of the funeral staff crossed himself. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. Dead people didn't move. Daniel leaned over her again, his voice trembling. "Evelyn, can you hear me?" Her eyelids trembled, weak, fragile, but real. The crowd erupted. Chaos, fear, disbelief. Security moved. The assistant shouted, "Call an ambulance!" But Daniel didn't move. He stayed beside her. Because now he understood something far more terrifying than death. Someone had buried her alive. Behind the chaos, the little girl stood silently, watching. She didn't look surprised. She looked like she had known all along. Daniel turned slowly toward her. Their eyes met, and in that moment he realized this wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder. The woman he loved wasn't dead. She had been silenced, hidden, buried, and someone had wanted her to disappear forever. The ambulance arrived in less than 6 minutes, but for Daniel, it felt like an eternity. He refused to let anyone close the coffin again. He stayed beside Evelyn, holding her hand. Her skin was cold, but not lifeless. Her breathing was shallow, fragile, real. Every breath she took was proof that someone had lied. The paramedics worked quickly, confused, uneasy. "This shouldn't be possible," one of them whispered. Daniel heard it, because he was thinking the same thing. They placed an oxygen mask over her face. Her chest rose slightly, stronger, not dead, never dead. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, Daniel turned. The little girl was still there, watching, silent. He walked toward her slowly. "What did your mother see?" he asked. The girl hesitated, then answered, "She said they were afraid." Daniel frowned. "Who?" The girl swallowed. "The doctors." Daniel felt something dark settle inside him. Fear. Not for himself, for Evelyn, because fear meant motive, and motive meant intention. "What's your mother's name?" he asked. "Rosa. Where is she now?" "They told her not to come back." Daniel nodded slowly. Of course they did, because witnesses were dangerous, especially poor ones. Easy to ignore, easy to silence. Easy to erase. That night, Daniel didn't go home. He stayed at the hospital, a different hospital, not the one that had declared his wife dead. He stood outside Evelyn's room, watching the machines, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Each breath was a miracle. Each breath was evidence. Each breath was war. The doctor stepped out quietly. "She's stable." Daniel's voice was calm, but cold. "What happened to her?" The doctor hesitated, carefully choosing words. "It appears she was given a powerful sedative." Daniel's eyes hardened. "A sedative?" The doctor nodded. "One strong enough to simulate death." Daniel stopped breathing. This wasn't misdiagnosis. This wasn't error. This was design. Someone had wanted her to appear dead. Why would someone do that? The doctor asked carefully. Daniel already knew the answer. Because Evelyn had discovered something worth killing for. He remembered the last conversation they had. She had seemed nervous, distracted, afraid. She had said something strange. "If anything happens to me, don't trust anyone." At the time, he thought it was stress. Now, he understood. It was a warning. Daniel left the hospital room. His assistant waited outside. "What do we know about the original hospital?" Daniel asked. The assistant spoke carefully. "It's owned by one of your company's partners." Daniel froze. "Which partner?" The assistant hesitated. Marcus Vane. Daniel felt the world's shift. Marcus wasn't just his partner. Marcus was his closest friend, his most trusted ally, the man who stood beside him at the funeral, the man who watched the coffin close, the man who never told him the truth. Daniel whispered, "No," but inside, he already knew. Marcus had the access. Marcus had the power. Marcus had the motive. Because if Evelyn had discovered something, Marcus would be the one with the most to lose. Back in the hospital room, Evelyn's fingers moved again. Slightly stronger. She wasn't gone. She was fighting. And Daniel understood something clearly now. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Outside, in the hallway, the little girl sat beside the wall, waiting, because she knew something else. Something even Daniel didn't know yet. Something her mother had told her. something that could destroy everything. Daniel Whitmore had buried his wife. But now he understood the truth. She hadn't died. She had been silenced, and the man responsible was closer than he ever imagined. Evelyn Whitmore opened her eyes just before dawn, weak, confused, but alive. Daniel was beside her immediately, his hand wrapped around hers. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times in the last 2 days, but now that it was real, he was afraid of what she might say. Her lips moved slightly, her voice barely a whisper. They know. Daniel leaned closer. Who? Her eyes struggled to focus. Marcus. Daniel felt his heart stop. Not from shock, from confirmation. Because he had already suspected it. But hearing her say his name made it real. Made it undeniable. Made it war. What did he do? Daniel asked softly. Evelyn's breathing became uneven. She was afraid. Not of death, of truth. He used the hospitals. Daniel frowned. For what? Her eyes filled with tears. To hide it. Hide what? Daniel waited, because now every word mattered. Every second mattered. Every truth mattered. Evelyn swallowed weakly. He was moving money. Daniel stayed silent, letting her continue. Through fake deaths. The words landed like a bomb. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Fake deaths. His mind raced instantly. Insurance, identity transfers, financial erasure, perfect crimes, because dead people couldn't testify. Dead people couldn't be questioned. Dead people disappeared. He told them I was dead, Evelyn whispered. Daniel tightened his grip on her hand. Why you? Evelyn's eyes met his. Because I found proof. Daniel closed his eyes. Marcus hadn't just tried to kill her. He had tried to erase her. Outside the room, Daniel's assistant waited with the girl. Her name was Lena. She hadn't left, because she knew her part wasn't finished. Daniel stepped outside. He looked at her carefully. Your mother saw something. Lena nodded. She saw them inject her. Daniel felt rage rise inside him. Not loud, not explosive, cold, controlled, dangerous. Where is your mother now? Lena looked down. She's hiding. Of course she was. Because witnesses didn't survive long in Marcus's world. Daniel looked at his assistant. We find her. The assistant nodded immediately. Because now this wasn't about suspicion. This was about proof. And proof destroyed powerful men faster than bullets ever could. Meanwhile, Marcus Vane stood in his office, looking out over the city. The same city he planned to control completely. He believed Evelyn was gone, buried, erased. He believed Daniel was grieving, weak, distracted, vulnerable. Marcus smiled faintly. Because power belonged to those who acted first. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. Marcus answered cautiously. Silence, then a voice. Calm, cold. Certain, she's alive. Marcus froze. Every muscle in his body locked. because he knew that voice. Daniel. Marcus didn't respond, couldn't, because there was nothing to say. The impossible had happened, and now everything was about to collapse. Daniel ended the call slowly. He didn't threaten, he didn't shout, he didn't need to, because Marcus already understood. The truth had survived, and truth was the only weapon Daniel needed. Back in the hospital room, Evelyn slept peacefully, alive, safe, protected. Daniel stood beside her, watching, waiting, preparing. Because Marcus had tried to bury his wife, but Marcus had failed, and failure had consequences. Daniel looked out the window. His empire was still standing, but now it had an enemy inside it, a traitor, a liar, a man who had tried to erase his life. And Daniel knew something Marcus didn't. Dead people were dangerous, because they had nothing left to lose. Marcus Vane believed he had buried the truth, but truth had opened its eyes. Marcus Vane didn't run. Men like him never ran. They adapted, they manipulated, they erased. That was how he had built everything. That was how he had survived. But now, for the first time in years, Marcus felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. He stood in his office, staring at the city below, waiting, thinking, calculating. Daniel wouldn't have called unless he had proof. Daniel wouldn't have called unless Evelyn had spoken. Marcus understood the truth immediately. The plan had failed, and failure was fatal. Marcus picked up his phone, dialed a number. "We need to clean this up." His voice was calm, but underneath it, fear lived. Because Marcus knew something Daniel didn't. Secrets didn't die easily, witnesses did. Across the city, Daniel sat beside Rosa, Lena's mother. She looked exhausted, afraid, fragile, but alive, and alive was enough. "I saw everything," Rosa said quietly. Daniel listened carefully. They injected her after they said she was dead. Daniel's hands clenched. "Who?" Rosa's eyes filled with fear. "The director. And Marcus." There it was. Truth. Clear. Undeniable. Final. Daniel nodded slowly. "You did the right thing." Rosa shook her head weakly. "They fired me." Daniel looked at Lena, then back at Rosa. "You saved her life. Not as comfort, as fact. Because without Rosa, Evelyn would be buried, alive, forgotten, gone forever." Daniel stood, turned to his assistant. "Prepare everything." His assistant understood immediately. Evidence. Expect the police to arrive so quickly. They entered his office calmly, professionally, inevitably. "Marcus Vane," one of them said. "You're under arrest." Marcus didn't resist, because resistance meant weakness, and Marcus still believed he was stronger. He smiled faintly. This is a mistake, but he knew it wasn't. because mistakes didn't come with evidence. Billionaire's wife found alive. Medical conspiracy exposed. CEO arrested. Truth replaced lies. Justice replaced power. Marcus lost everything, not in violence, but in exposure. Because truth didn't need force. Truth only needed time. Weeks later, Evelyn stood outside the hospital, alive, breathing, free. Daniel stood beside her, holding her hand, grateful. Holding her mother's hand. The girl who had spoken when no one else did. The girl who had stopped death itself. Daniel walked toward her, knelt down. "You saved her." Lena shook her head. "I just told the truth." Daniel smiled softly. Because truth was the most powerful thing in the world, and it had come from someone the world ignored. Daniel helped Rosa and Lena, not as charity, as gratitude. Evelyn, watching the sunset, he thought about everything he almost lost, everything he almost buried, everything he almost never saw again. He whispered, "I thought I lost you." Evelyn squeezed his hand gently. "I never left." Daniel understood now. Power wasn't control, power wasn't wealth, power was truth. And truth had been spoken by a poor little girl at a funeral.